This is a nice little chart I like to offer for a quick description of the pay for performance program model. If we start in the top left, we have our program implementation partners, those energy efficiency companies and contractors who are out in the field installing and working directly with our customers. And so, it starts with them, obviously, finding customers for whom they wish to make an energy efficiency investment, both the customer and the implementer, or engaging in a behavioral or operational type of program. And the impact of those programs, will be measured at the actual PG&E meter. So rather than relying on prescriptive savings ascribed to individual measures or widgets in advance, we've instead asked that the implementers work directly with our customers to devise pretty much a tailored energy efficiency strategy, a strategy that will allow the customer to see utility bill savings and will generate an investment return for the ratepayer funded programs. So those metered savings obviously are fed back to PG&E, and they are used in our contract structure, our performance contract structure, to pay the implementer only for those savings that we were able to measure. The last key point I'll make here is that this highlights a significant shift in the program model here, where there is an increasing amount of risk displaced from the ratepayer to the implementer, again, hand in hand with sort of throwing by the wayside prescribed values and a discrete list of energy efficiency measure opportunities. We've instead asked the implementers to work with our customers on things that would generate savings, and indeed they have that incentive aligned with them because the contract structure only rewards the implementers for being able to generate energy savings. I wanted to offer this slide as a depiction of really the variety of program types, both measures and intervention types that we've seen in the programs we have so far. So PG&E has, in our residential pay for performance pilot program, we have 4 sort of sub-programs implemented by 3 different implementers. And what was a very rewarding part of soliciting and procuring and implementing these programs is the innovation that these implementers brought to market. We've seen these implementers adopt new technologies that had not been, that hadn't been around long enough to have even had any research and prescribed savings values assigned to them. We've seen our implementers incorporate behavioral and operational regimens, either in a standalone fashion that can be actually delivered remotely, which has come in quite handy in a shelter-in-place environment. And we've seen that they've coupled that with some energy efficiency investments and, really made a concerted effort to have all of these pieces of the program work together. And again, this was really enabled by throwing off the need to rely on a discrete list of prescribed measure savings and instead ask that the implementers both make an investment and work with customers to make investments on things that can materially impact their energy usage. As I mentioned, maybe not enough, but it's a pilot program, the Pay for Performance program is. We have been running with our 4 programs, our 3 implementers, for a couple of years now, and we are looking to increase customer participation to the point where we can conduct an evaluation. To Carmen's point earlier, of course, we do have the luxury of having very real-time feedback, which I get into here in a minute. However, we are leaving it in the pilot phase for the short term, with hopes that it can expand to a more portfolio-wide solution in the future. So The successes, obviously not to be diminished, was really the fact that we were able to, we were afforded the luxury of having the legislation that allowed us to run a solicitation, and we received very positive responses to that solicitation. As I mentioned, we do have our implementers running in the field right now. And two of the contracts with our implementers actually do contain variable pricing, going back to one of my earliest slides where I depicted the need to ensure that energy savings occurred in the evening peak. These contracts actually do specifically reward in an enriched fashion savings that are generated during those peak times. As I mentioned in the past couple of slides, we have seen in a very innovative implementation, both with the suite of measures selected or the types of interventions offered, but certainly also with the type of feedback that we're providing to our implementers and how they're incorporating that and pivoting their programs to address what they're seeing based on the Caltrac measured meter-based results. Of course, as a pilot program, it is also incumbent on us to identify challenges that we need to overcome, and the forefront of which is really the distributed energy resource landscape and the increasing landscape in California. So we're seeing many of our residential customers or an increasing number of our residential customers are adopting behind-the-meter solar. They're adopting behind-the-meter battery storage and installing electric vehicle charging stations. If it's not already apparent, these are challenges for us because we, initially would rely on the meter and the consumption or lack of consumption of electricity on that meter to tell us how our program is faring with our customer. Obviously, these other aspects, given that they sit, or these other DERs, given that they sit sort of outside of energy efficiency, throw a little bit of a confounding variable that we need to address, right? We would not want to attempt to take credit for reductions that were really due to a customer installing distributed generation at their site. The last couple of points here, I really just want to say, discussing and ensuring that our implementers are properly aware of their compensation model and what's expected of them in terms of making an investment up front that may not offer return unless they have confidence in the savings that they're going to be generating is a bit of a new type of model, especially when they're dealing with smaller independent contractors to work in the field. So that's a conversation that we know has to be had with implementers and is an important one to keep in mind as these programs roll out more widely in other jurisdictions and even in our portfolio. And then I'll say also, given this new type of program, we need to ensure that there's a cost and benefit reporting structure that can accommodate it. Next slide. So I'll go quickly. I want to keep us on track here. The program goals, obviously, as I mentioned, are to make sure that this is a sustainable model for the EE portfolio, the energy efficiency portfolio, and to dovetail into my last two slides, we believe that this can, as a next step, allow energy efficiency to emerge as a reliable distributed energy resource and as a grid resource. PG&E and actually across the California investor-owned utilities, we are procuring new energy efficiency programs for our EE portfolio. And one of the aspects of this solicitation, this RFP that we've included, was to ask that grid resource, or to ask bid to include whether or not they can sufficiently provide resources as sort of a distributed energy resource on par with what we're seeing out of other DERs like solar PV or behind the meter storage. So we've asked them to include whether or not the program can provide verifiable savings at specific locations using predictable times. Obviously, the magnitude is important, and what the availability of it is, how quickly they can how quickly they can offer this resources, and what assurance they have surrounding it. This was to ensure that these programs, these energy efficiency investments, can compete on par with other DERs, as I mentioned. So requirements were that they that they include a meter-based approach with near real-time embedded measurement and verification. Obviously, that's key, as Carmen had mentioned. And that they incorporate both the customer data feedback they're getting and the grid data that we would be providing to them to ensure that they're delivering these solutions at the right time and in the right fashion. And finally, this last slide is just to depict that, California is quite a large state with lots of varied terrain. And so the grid resource needs of California are significantly varied depending on where an energy efficiency, ideally a DER investment, is being made. So in the solicitation, we ask that the bidders, the responders, be conscious of these differences.